What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate you sticking with me. Today, I'm going to take you through some footage that I recorded actually a little while ago. I tore all the suspension out from underneath it, removed the axle from the front, so we could start getting ready to get the 1-tons underneath it. So a little bit of footage that I did before, but wanted to take a minute to introduce it to you. So stay tuned, check it out, and we'll see you at the end of the video. Pulled the front axle out of the Jeep finally. It took a little bit of time. Man, when you pull this tiny little Dana 30 out and you look at it compared to this giant Dana 60, it's evident that you know, it's got to go. Everything's been cleared out of here. Obviously, I've got some cutting to do still, but we're gonna get going on the suspension. The update is I'm gonna use an Artec front truss for the Dana 60. It's a 92 ball joint Dana 60, so it's not a Super Duty. I've looked at that too. I get the knuckles and all that stuff, but there's so much work to do for some of those things, and the cost of that, it just kind of outweighs if you can find a ball joint Dana 60, high pinion, legit axle. I mean, this thing is easy to upgrade. It's a legit axle, so I already have Yukon locking hubs for this thing. It's just legit. It's a good axle. So, and you don't have to convert the 8 lugs that are out there. It's already the same thing. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're getting at. Got the axle pulled out. What I realized is I do have a rack for all my axles that I have here. But what I need is a little rack that I can just build an axle on. So Artec truss is on its way. Ordered up that so that we can start to build out what's needed to do the 1-ton swap, and we'll go from there. Okay, so my wife came home with my son. Got to spend time with them too. So anyways, what I was saying was, got this Dana 60. This rack is great. I built it basically because I got a Dana 80, corporate 14 bolt, Dana 60. I needed something where I can store them, move them around, still have them mobile, but now I've got to make some changes, right? We got to swap this around. So I ordered an Artec truss for the Dana 60 front. It's going to swap it over. It says MJ, ZJ, LJ, TJ. Doesn't say anything about a WJ, but I mean, it's all pretty much the same thing. They're all pretty much the same geometry, so I think it'll work just fine. If it doesn't, even a slight, it's gonna, I'm not gonna be negative, but even a slight modification will work over trying to fab everything together myself. I'm gonna do an iron rock off-road 14 bolt truss for the rear. That's gonna let me relocate all of that stuff. And same thing is, they have like an aftermarket bolt on, so you can do, you can put your own tabs in there if you want to for the 4-link if you're going to link the top. But I am going to use the rough country lift with a bolt on for the top A-arm. But I really need an axle stand for that. I want something where I can, so I've stripped down this whole axle, right? Everything's off of it except these mounts need to come off. Realistically, this probably needs to be grinded down, same, and then the back perch for the sway bar. So some of that stuff needs to come off. There's a few brackets that need to be cut off on the 14 bolt. It's going to need a little bit of work there. And you want something that you can actually work on, right? So same thing with the 14 bolt. You're going to clean it up. I'm going to spray paint them once they're all done. Going to open them up, make sure the gears are all good to go, make sure there's nothing in there rattling around. Shouldn't be. Got these from a buddy at a salvage yard, Pasco Auto Wrecking. If you need anything, go to call Hayes at Pasco Auto Wrecking. Guy's the man. But I think we should be good to go on that. But I want something that's at a height where I can grind this stuff down, make space so that I can, put the trusses on, weld them in real well, want them at a workable height, and want them so they're on something that I can work on by itself without hovering over other axles. So this axle rack was specifically built for multiple axles. I'm gonna pull the 60 off, put the Dana 30 on there, and be able to play around with that. But I needed an axle rack, so that's what we started doing today. Built these guys, cut these guys, drilled them out a little bit. Same here. This is all from metal that I had in the back here. I've got some wheels that were laying around, so it's all material that I've had, but actually, and I'll have to link him here. Man, who was it? I'm not gonna say because I don't want to say it off the top of my head, but I'm gonna link him because he does a great job with all of his trucks, and he had a great axle rack, said pick this up, or he had a buddy pick it up for him or something. And I thought, man, I'm going to build that. So I've only got a couple of things left to go. These are going to be used. I've already ground down a couple of them. This is just going to be used for the bevel that the axle is going to sit in. But that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just building out this axle rack so that I can have something that's a little bit more mobile, grind it down, get the brackets off, spend some time cleaning it up, get the new truss on it and get it ready to install. But realistically, what that does too is, I've got a garage that's full of stuff. It's not the easiest thing to work in when you've got a full project. You've got the axle rack. I've got this thing sitting out here, right? I've got our vehicles in the driveway. I'm taking up all the space. So I need to build something that allows me to operate a little bit more. So we're going to finish that up. I'm going to build this axle rack out. I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. And if you got any suggestions, comments, leave them in the comments below. Let me know. What do you think? This makes sense. Should I have done it differently? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just having fun with it. So enjoy, and we'll talk to you shortly. All right. So, I haven't been able to put in as much time on the WJ as I'd like to. But I did get the old axle out from underneath it, really cleaned up everything down there. Next steps are really need to clean the brackets off of this guy. So what I'm going to try to do, honestly, I think the last time I did this, I don't know that I had the plas cutter. So it's been a little bit since I chopped all this stuff off, like, the 14 bolts for the Durango. But these are pretty, they look pretty open in terms of, it's not all casted to the axle. So I think I should be able to get the plasma cutter in here, kind of come close in on these and get rid of the leaf spring mounts, and get rid of these U-bolt mounts. And this bracket kind of looks the same too. So yeah, should be able to get in pretty close on this, and I feel pretty good about that. So yeah, should be good. Let's get started and see how it goes. we're making progress, so I can't complain. You know, everything takes time. Jeep's still sitting on jack stands. That's okay. The one thing we did get to do, though, is clean this guy up pretty good. It takes a little bit of time. I shot some video yesterday with what the brackets look like, but they are all off of it. It's cleaned up. Kind of trim this guy down a little bit. That's obviously a big solid chunk of metal. So I didn't go quite as hard on the front here as I did on the back, just to kind of round it off. These little guys, obviously hard to get into and get this off just with where they sit. But I think that's a pretty good start. So what we're gonna do now is get this truss kit from Artec out of the box, unpackaged, and let's see what we got. I figure Artec, I've used a lot of Artec stuff, used it on the Durango, really like their products. This is a 1-ton swap kit. It says, what does it say? TJ, ZJ, MJ, all the J's, everything except for a WJ. They don't have WJ on there. I did call them and ask them if they thought it would work, but I left them a message and no one answered. I know they're busy guys, so I was like, whatever. We're just gonna do it anyways and see what happens. So pretty much all of those are set up, and I know a lot of TJ parts work on the WJ. I don't know why it wouldn't, and if there's a little bit of, you know, fabrication we need to do to make it work, that's fine, but it's basically the same thing. This kit specifically is for the axle that I have, which is a 92 Dana 60. It's a ball joint front, already 8 on 6.5 lug pattern. You know, same as the rear end, and I know I've mentioned this before too, but you can find the front end with 410 gears in it. The rear end's got 410 gears in it. It's got a posi lock GM 14 bolt rear. That's out of an 04, I believe. Yeah, so this guy's out of an 04. That's the next one. We're going to cut some brackets off, but we're going to get this set up first to start to go in here. 410s, or it's, you know, it's a higher gearing than you know, I think it's 373s in this. Not positive, but I know that it's a higher gearing. Again, I don't plan to run crazy huge tires on this. I'd like it to fit 37s. I have no idea what to expect when you're kind of piecing a kit together. We're going to be on 6.5-inch Iron Rock off-road springs, long arm kit from Rough Country, and then the 1-tons with the trusses on them. So that's going to play a little bit of a factor too. So we're going to see. I have no idea really what size tires we're going to end up on. I also don't want it to be too tall. I want a low center of gravity. That's kind of my goal with any rig that I build. Low center of gravity, lots of travel. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, instead of doing the Super Duty front, we went with a 92 Dana 60 high pinion, sweet axle. I think the other thing that this has over the new Super Duty stuff is if you don't need this giant Super Duty front end, if you're really not beating on a trail rig all the time, I don't think it's necessary to spend all the money on that. And what I really like is the brackets on this were really moderate to cut off. Like, there wasn't that much cutting and grinding. So yeah, if you're gonna take this thing out and beat the daylights out of it and you'd like to have it like that, absolutely. I'm pretty heavy footed, so I may end up beating on it a little bit more than I plan to, but that's what this thing's for. So we're gonna get back to this at some point sooner than later too. Need to get the headers built. We're not going to use the stock manifolds. I've gone back and forth on that. Can't find a set of headers that work on it. I digress. I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but anyways, let's get this kit out from Artec and let's start getting it lined up. So I love this kit. It's pretty awesome. It's amazing that you can make something that's just so precise and connects to itself. So I love it. The way it's jigged up is just awesome. I want to make a getting jiggy with it reference, but I won't. So check this out. I took a couple minutes here and I kind of mocked it up. Actually, it fits so precisely on this that is just sitting there right now. It's not tack welded yet. So what I wanted to do is I went through here and in particular You can see this piece, the outermost lower control arm bracket. This guy, there's just a little bit, I think, of trimming that I need to do in there, but very little. I already ground that down real well. I think right in this little corner, we're gonna bring a little bit of that down, but that's actually, it fits really well in there. And you can see that the axle matches the radius of the bracket itself. It says it's gonna come in a touch like 1/16 below the shock tab, which, you know, if you really look at that innermost part, that's pretty much where it is. Let me gonna move this down a little bit if I can. Got stuff falling out. But the way that this stuff fits in, oh, that's why this guy can't be there. Stay. So, man, this just sits so nicely. It latches right in there. You can almost tell between this mount and the coil mount down there, you know, just looking at it, eyeballing it. I mean, I haven't leveled it out yet. I'll use an angle finder to actually see that both of them are the same. But just the way that this truss sits on here is really nice. So taking off the brackets, I did do a little bit of grinding. Obviously, after grinding all of that, I was pretty over it, and I didn't want to keep going all night long. So what I did, you can kind of see some of my Sharpie marks here. I really just went through and drew on the areas where I needed to make sure I ground it all down so that we can weld it. Did that in front and back for the casting. We're gonna let the piece go here. This little guy slides right up inside of here. Kind of hard to do it with one hand, but not terribly hard because it's so well jigged. So everything is mocked up where it needs to be. Again, nothing's tacked yet. So it's all just sitting here, but it fits really nicely. I wanted to make sure that I understood where everything was going first, and I do now, because Artec has done an awesome job, not only with the kit, but just the directions. You know, I'm sure that they've revised their instructions a couple of times, because, you know, based on, you know, some of the capitalized text, lightly tack weld piece 1. Do not final weld anything until all pieces are completely mocked up. Obviously, you know, you run into things where you're like, oh man, I was like, went through and I did it all, and then I was like, oh, I had to pull it back apart, but I already final welded it. You're like, well, you should have read the instructions. So you'll weld it up, we'll tack it all in place. This top piece will get very lightly tacked. Take that back off, final weld the whole thing. And this thing is, I mean, it's pretty simple. So there's only a couple of more pieces that go with it. Obviously, I kind of mock some of this stuff up a little bit too, and you can see where these brackets go. So I've played around with all this stuff just to make sure I know where everything's going. But this is the bulk of it, and after that, everything kind of tacks into the top. The upper control arm mounts just pop into these slots. It seems pretty straightforward. PSF, pretty straightforward. And I think that'll make it pretty simple once I get the rest of this ground down. So really, what I need to do now, it's more of the dirty work. I need to get grinding, get more of this axle cleaned up so that we can actually start tacking to it. The other thing is we're probably going to heat up this axle because we don't want to do anything to the iron casting or the cast iron unless it's warmed up. I haven't got that far in the instructions, but I would imagine it talks in here probably about heating this up. Usually, I think the way that I've done axles in the past, because the shave kit that I use for this, you're obviously welding that straight to the bottom of the casting. It is a little bit different in terms of you know, you're cutting off a piece and you're welding that on, and it's an empty axle, so this is going all across everything. And I didn't weld to the casting on the top for the cross members that I built, or excuse me, for the trusses that I built. So yeah, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more of a specific task on this, but yeah, I'm just gonna get in here. I'm gonna look at the instructions and make sure that I'm heating up the casting the right way and making sure that we've got it up to temperature so we can actually weld it. But next step is just clean up this axle. It's not really that fun, so might put you on time lapse here and let you check it out, but we'll see you in a little bit. Guys, so spent a bunch of time today cleaning up the axle. A few modifications I had to make. I'm going to show you a little bit of that, but we're ready to do a full weld on this at this point. So this is the Artec truss. It's the 1-ton swap for the TJ. The only thing I really had to do was in fitting in the lower control arms on this side, you wanted to make sure that the gap was proper here. Two things. One, I wanted to make sure like it wasn't hanging under the axle too much, and two, you want to make sure the gap is just proper between here. So everything is tacked in place at this point. I think it looks really good. Honestly, I've been considering a couple of other trusses for the rear for the 14 bolt, but I think I'm going to go with Artec on this too. I just really like it, and I really like the way that it's templated out. So this is the only like individual piece, this little guy here, number 4, just a little splice that in there. What I did have to do a little bit, I had to modify the top of this bracket just because of where it is. I don't know if it's the grinding down of some of the previous brackets that were on this, or quite honestly I think it could be just where I have aligned the farther side so that this one lines up, but I need to grind that a little bit. So it is ready to go. You line up the coil brackets. I put all the coil springs on those to make sure that they were in the spot that needed to be. It's at a little bit of an angle right now. Let's see. This is the only thing that is not tack welded on. But I think this looks pretty good, like just the way it's all set up. So this guy is ready to go, and look at how good, a Dana 60 with the truss looks on it compared to this big piece of junk. So this axle is just, honestly, what I was thinking is, man, how long has this been sitting? Brakes are a little rusty on it, but when you look inside of them, I mean, that's pretty clean. I was like, man, I don't know. Hopefully I don't have to replace all the rotors on it. And I don't think I'm going to have to, because if you look at the pads on this thing too, pads are legit. I mean, I think everything is going to work once you get it going and you get it moving, get that dust off of there. But when I pulled this thing off, I mean, it is gnarly. And I've been driving this thing on the regular, so it's just a much smaller axle, and it's in rough shape. It's just a tiny little guy. Put the towel in here because it just keeps spewing out gear oil on my driveway, and I don't need that. But yeah, the brakes are in rough shape. The insides of them are just really corroded. To be honest, I don't know if those ever been replaced. I haven't replaced them, and this is part of the reason is I've waited to do a lot of this stuff. It's actually part of the reason that I didn't add new tires to the Jeep, because I wanted to wait until I wasn't going to pay full price for a set of tires that I wanted to upgrade anyways. And that was the point, is, you know, let's get, I think, I'm hoping some 37s on it. I pulled out the lift kit here too. That's the other thing, is when you come back here and you look at the size of some of these pieces, the lift kit is legit. Like, these are huge pieces, and to some extent the pictures on Rough Country don't do these justice. Like, I'm going to compare it to some of it, and I'll show you guys in later videos, but the size of some of these brackets, I mean, they're huge. This is thick stuff. I mean, to me, all the Rough Country stuff just looks amazing. I mean, you know, obviously I have these big Heims, and those are Artec Heims. So I've used a lot of Artec stuff. That's an Artec high steer bracket and everything else. I mean, I used big things in the Durango so I can beat the crap out of it. But grab this real quick, actually. When you look at this arm, I mean, that's a beast. That is a big arm. So I think it's still 2-inch, just like my links are. Obviously it's not a Heim joint. It's got a rubber bushing in there, so it's a little bit different, but yeah, those are big arms. I'm excited to get them on here. I'm excited to see how it is. I'm going to start to finish weld this right now. There's a lot of work to do with that in the casting. I think, just based on what I have to do today, I'm going to weld in the truss on the axle tube itself. I dumped sand on my axles before. I dropped them down and did it that way. I'm not really in the mood to do all that stuff right now. What I'd like to do is get a welding blanket, wrap it in it. So before I heat up the casting and do all that, I'm going to weld in the assembly on the axle tube itself and go from there. So spent some time over the weekend getting the truss welded on, showed you a little bit of that. Welded it on all to the axle housing, welded some of the components to themselves. What I didn't do, just because of time, was you need to heat the cast diff center section up to 400 degrees heat so that your welds weld properly, so that it works properly. I'm using a MIG welder. I don't have a TIG welder. I'd love to use that. I'd love to do that in general, but I don't. So I'm working with a MIG. I've done it in the past. It works just fine, but you do have to do a couple of things in particular when you're welding a cast. One of those being, like I said, heat the diff up, the center section, all the cast portions of it to 400 degrees as you're welding it. So I have a propane torch that I used in the past. That's what I'm going to use again. We're going to use that now. We're going to get it heated up. This is kind of the setup here. Pretty basic. You can go buy a propane torch just about anywhere. It hooks up right to the propane tank itself. Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, wherever it is, they usually got them. So the other thing you need is temperature finder, infrared, excuse me, thermometer. With all the stupid crap going on the last 2 years, those things are everywhere. It should be a dime a dozen, but you know, that thing they press to your forehead, and you're like, oh man, you're 400 degrees, should get that welded. I don't know, never mind. So I'm gonna get going on that. It is, like I said, windy out today. And the problem with that is that obviously there's gas in the welder, and if it's too windy, it just doesn't want to weld properly, because it's almost like it blows the gas out of the area where the weld is. I don't know that I'm saying that properly because I'm not a certified welder, but I've done it enough to know that if I've tried it outside on a windy day, it's not great. So we've got this kind of set up in the garage. Yes, that is a tank, my welding tank over there. It's an additional one, so we won't be getting that close to it anyways. I wouldn't worry about it. So I'm going to heat up the center section. I've got a welding blanket behind it. There's two reasons for that. One, I had it for use. So we're going to put it up back there just so I'm not getting spatter all over everything. Not that there's anything crazy back there. It's not really that big of a deal, but also just with the heat, I don't need to melt anything. I just wanted to kind of keep some stuff covered. But the biggest reason that I have it is because after this center section is welded and it's heated up, I'm going to wrap that welding blanket around this thing real well to let it cool down. You want it to cool slowly. You don't want it to cool fast. So you're going to want to take your time and just let it cool down, and that's part of the reason I brought this thing into the garage too, because with the air or with the wind out here today, I worry that it's going to cool faster and that's going to be an issue. So I do have the garage open right now, but I'm going to keep it cracked or pull it down a little bit so that it kind of helps fend off some of the wind. And that's about it. I think we're pretty much ready to go. I need to do a couple other things, but watch as I do this. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, you know, I haven't done this that many times, so if you've done it a bunch and you got suggestions for me, feel free to put them in the comments below. If you have questions about it, I'm happy to try to answer that. And honestly, there's probably other people that are watching this that might be able to answer them better than me. So stay tuned and let's see how this goes. Alright, so that's a wrap for the day. Again, that was some of the footage that I filmed not too long ago, but again, wanted to share that with you. We're making good progress. We're cruising right along in the WJ. Next steps is I'm going to get the rest of this Dana 60 welded that's next to me, get it spray painted to get it underneath this thing. The 14 bolt is next, and we're going to get all the suspension in there. So that's really what's coming up. Now that we've got the front end out, we've got all the motor stuff taken care of. I've got a bumper here as well from Detail Fab Works. We're going to get that fabricated up. Got that from him as a DIY. So stay tuned because the fun is about to begin. Like, subscribe, comment. As always, give me your thoughts, provide some suggestions. I'm open to anything, so don't hesitate. Just comment down below. Don't forget, again, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of the good stuff that's coming up. We'll see you soon. Thanks again for watching.